there, welcome back to Search My Heart podcast, a place where we have honest conversations from an honest place. And today our topic is church hurt: to stay, to change churches, or to leave church completely. I'm your co-host, Prince Okechukwu, and with me is my lovely wife, Dami Okechukwu. All right, Dami, let's jump in. But before we go into the topic for today, let's catch up a bit. How was your week? Tell me something I don't already know.
Hey, well, hello everyone. It's very nice to be here again with you. It says episode 3. That's such a win.
Yes.
So grateful to God. How was my week? Uneventful.
Oh, okay. Give me something.
I'm not sure there's anything.
Did you go to work? How was work? Something?
Yeah, I worked. I can't think of anything really. It was an okay week. Tell me about your week. Maybe I'll have some time to think about mine.
Podcast listeners, let me give you guys something exciting. I think I might have prefaced it with so much excitement. My week was good. It was a busy week. It was in the office Monday to Thursday. Meetings, counseling sessions, different things.
Was this the week you officiated a wedding, or was that last week?
Oh, that was last week. So I officiated a wedding. That was the first wedding I'd officiated. So that was interesting. I would just a little thing that threw me off was when the ceremony basically started, right? And I welcomed the guests. It was a small wedding, like about 20 people. And I said, who's excited to be here? Because that's what I do when I go to church and I'm about to preach. I kind of amp the atmosphere, get people excited. And when I said, who's excited to be here? Nobody answered. It was just dead silence. So I did it again, thinking maybe they didn't hear me.
That wasn't the vibe.
Silence continued. The third time, then one person said, yeah. So then I realized it wasn't the kind of crowd that responds to things like that.
Yeah.
So I officiated the wedding was about an hour, but then at the end of the wedding, and when it was time to say you may kiss the bride, all of a sudden the energy I was looking for at the beginning suddenly showed up, and everybody was clapping. And I said, "Oh, I guess I've been spending a lot of time in church."
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes I'm thinking for people to say certain things and they didn't, but it was good. It was a good experience, and it was nice. It was a small wedding,
and the groom was emotional, unlike some other grooms like you.
Yeah,
we love an emotional groom, so
that also threw me off. But I won't go into that. But it was a good wedding. It was a good wedding.
Yeah.
So,
and it was the first one you officiated.
Yes,
I'm so proud of you. Good job.
So yeah, so that's a little bit of a catch up, because I guess when we release the episode, it's usually 2 weeks in between.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was one of the most interesting things that's happened in the last 2 weeks.
Because I feel like this year you've officiated quite a few funerals, so it's nice to balance it out with
So and I had some baby dedications too of recent. So that it was good. That was my week basically.
That's a celebration. See, mine's not anywhere as eventful as yours. I'm looking forward to the weeks to come. I have quite a few events and concerts to go to, so I'm excited for. Yeah.
What's one concert you're looking for?
Oh, Call Out Music is coming to Toronto.
Okay.
I'm a Call Out Music girly. So.
When's it coming? March?
Sometime in March. I think March 18th or something. And I'm going with a few of my friends. So that's very exciting.
Exciting. All right. Yeah. I won't pretend like I'll be going with you, but I'm sure you'll have a swell time.
I just realized I didn't even invite you.
That's okay. But we've gone to Call That Music concert.
Yeah. So, and you had a good time. Sorry. I actually just realized I never invited you for this. Sorry. I'm going with the girls, so it's fine.
And I'm not offended.
Okay, there we go. Next time.
Transitioning to the first question on church hurt. How would you describe your personal relationship with church over the years right now? Just share a little bit on that.
My relationship with the church. Can I play that back to you? What's your relationship with church like? I want to think about this a little bit, so I'm sending it back to you.
I mean, church has always been part of my life. I would say that I grew up going to church. I think one of the things I've been reflecting on the past few weeks is that it took going into university to actually really define or take ownership of my journey with God as a person. Because for all the period from the day I was born to my teenage years in high school, it was basically going to church because my mom wanted us to go to church to do different things, like get involved in church. So as far back as I can remember, I've always been involved in church. So my relationship with church has been good. Like, it's been a place of formation and growth, and a place of just finding myself, finding my identity, where I was given a voice, given an opportunity to get to know my strengths, my giftings, and things like that. So that, without going into too much detail, church has been part of my life.
Yeah, I agree. I would say my story is very similar to yours. I was raised in church, born in church. I think as a kid, we used to go to church. Were you born in
church actually in the building?
No. No, I'm sure people understand what I mean by that. But yeah, I was dedicated the full works. And I think as a teenager, as a young girl, we used to go to church 4 times a week.
Oh, wow.
3 to 4. Like, you go on a Tuesday night, Thursday night, Saturday to clean up or something, and then Sunday. But then on Sunday, sometimes we would even have 2 services. Like, we have a morning service and then an evening service. So very much a church girl.
Do you guys have the fellowship late in the evening too?
Oh, and then sometimes we have house fellowship in our house. Yeah. And so you have to quickly go home after church, cook, and then get ready for house fellowship. So I would say, honestly, my relationship with the church in general has been positive. When you go to church 4 times a week, as a child, a lot of your childhood friendships, therefore, like, stem from church, which is helpful. And then we had a lot of church uncles and aunties that you got to learn from. Some of them very cool, some of them a little wonky. And then I think most of the things I know about the Bible, I learned from, like, my Sunday school teachers, from going to, what's that thing called? Draw Your Sword. All the Bible competitions. I really, that part of my childhood, I'm really grateful for. And then fast forward to becoming an adult, I think my experience with church has varied. Like, obviously growing up in Nigeria, I would say it was a strictly Nigerian experience. Then I came here, I went to a Nigerian church, so that was still pretty Nigerian. And then in uni, I started to branch out and try, like, churches from different ethnicities. And that was different. And then went to our old church and then our new church. So lots of experiences at church. And I think it's been fun. It's been very formative. So I would say I have a positive experience, but there have been some challenging experiences, which we'll probably go into later. But that's my relationship with church.
Okay. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I guess the next question I'll probably ask will be, when it comes to picking the church, you talked about the period where, I think it was university days, right?
Yeah.
Where picking the church and figuring out different churches with different ethnicities, probably styles of worship and things like that. What values are important to you when picking the church? Choose a church to worship. What do you look out for?
I mean, I think I can start with values that I think are important in general that should apply to everybody, and then the values that are specific to me. I think it's important. So I would say in general for everybody, obviously Bible believing, very important. All of the Bible is important. All of the Bible is relevant. So a church that emphasizes preaching from the Bible is definitely important. I would say community, a church that values community. So I feel like generally churches that, like, support small groups, life groups, house fellowships, things like that, very important, so that you're not just coming and leaving. There's actually an opportunity for you to build community if you want. I think that's the biblical model for church, because at that time people used to meet in their homes. So I think at the very least there should be opportunities outside of Sundays to interact with people in church. And then it's up to you if you want to take advantage of those opportunities, but they should exist. What else would I say is important in a church? I would say integrity. Very, very important in terms of the pastoral leadership, and just the leadership in general. Like, when you hear your pastor talk and all of that, do they have integrity? Do they talk about, like, on stage, the way they talk about people, does it show integrity? You know what I mean? Or they're always telling you everybody's business. Like, when you talk to the pastor, do they feel like a safe person in general? I would say those are probably 3 universal things that are important in picking a church. For me, other factors that I consider is, like, I don't know. I like to go to a church where I get to experience other people's cultures. So for me, as long as like my ethnicity or my culture isn't the only culture in the church, I'm happy to like, even if it's like another African culture or like whatever, it can even be Black still, but just something different than what I'm used to is important to me. And then I would say, other than that, those are the values I can think of. But I'll play back to you. What do you think?
Before I answer, the question I would probably ask to that is, when it comes to looking forward to experiencing church with other ethnicities, did that change when you moved to Canada?
Of course. I mean, in Nigeria, there's different ethnicities.
There is. So
but I feel like I grew up in Lagos. Like, there's nothing. It's impossible to go to Lagos and have a church with just like one culture or one tribe. So
I mean, there's some really strong, if you find, but
it's very hard. It's the kind of church I grew up in. Like it was impossible. But obviously, when I moved to Canada, I was like, okay, if the city I'm living in is reflective of like so many cultures, I want to go to a church where I get to experience that in the body of Christ as well. And I'm obsessed with the verse in Revelation that's like, every nation, every tribe, every tongue worshiping Jesus. And I'm just like, whatever experience I can have here on earth that's close to that is just amazing. So I love that.
Well, that's good, because I think for me, values, you mentioned really some really good ones. I think one that's really important to me is a church where I can, two things: a place where I can serve and a place where I can find authentic community. So authentic communities, I just want to connect with people. I genuinely want to know that I am supporting people and I'm being supported. So it's a non-negotiable for me. It has to feel like a family. Now, doesn't matter if the church is 100 people, 2,000 people. There has to be a part of that church where I feel like I am known, I'm connected, and if something is going on in my life, I am joining with people, and I am also joining with people when they're going through stuff. So I think that part is important. So I would not really be able to say this is my church if I don't feel connected as I can visit, I can probably watch a sermon online, but I have to be connected. So that's authentic community is one piece. The other part is serving. For as long as I remember, serving in church has been a thing that has been very important to me. I did it at a point because I was asked to do it, but it was also in serving in church I discovered the things, my purpose, my gift, and the things that I really love to do, which I'm a pastor. So obviously teaching and preaching came with that. But before then, it was just, I really found my voice in church. So serving is, when I first moved to Canada, the first thing I asked the church I attended for years, after I attended the first service, I was like, how can I start serving? What do I? And they're like, well, we have to go through the discipleship class. I was like, when is that done? I want to serve. Like, what does that look like? And last night I was saying this, it played a role even in campus fellowship, which is university days in Nigeria. My undergraduate studies, studying philosophy for 4 years, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, in the eastern part of Nigeria. One of the things that really was the deciding factor for me between two campus fellowships, which is church within the campus, basically the same setup, but it's run by students. Students preach, teach, worship, everything. The deciding factor in the two of them was, I looked at one and it was great. It was amazing. But then I asked, what can I do? And they said, first years don't serve. You have to be in year 2 before you can actually serve.
Why?
And then that's just that's the style of the leadership, and that's how. And it's great. It's function. I get they wanted people to be grounded and to grow.
Yeah, and they just make sure you're not.
Which is, I think there's a place for it. But then the other campus fellowship which had also reached out to me and asked me to visit. There was an opportunity to just go on evangelism with them, to serve in small capacities, to serve in the prayer team. I just saw a group that was in, do you want to serve God? Let's go. Do you want to pray? Like, they were willing to get me involved in things. And for me, that was what swung the other campus fellowship is great. There was nothing wrong with them. They're actually amazing and they're well known around the different campuses in Nigeria. But personally, I chose the campus fellowship that allowed me to serve. And it was really important that I started then, because those 4 years was not just a degree. It was a great opportunity to really learn about myself. So authentic community, service. Those are two key things that are important when people.
Yeah, so I think we talked about Bible believing, authentic community, opportunities to serve, and leadership integrity as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Let's push the envelope a bit and just maybe share with me a little bit, or share with our listeners a little bit on your personal experience with church hurt.
This one is hard.
And just to clarify before we jump into that, just defining church hurt, just a simple definition.
We should.
It's a term that captures the emotional and spiritual wounds inflicted in the church context.
Yeah.
So the things might be through relationships.
Yeah.
Through things that maybe you were hoping would be offered to you there, but were not offered, or just things that happen within the context of a church. There's hurts in other parts of life, but this is hurts within the context of a church. Emotional, spiritual ones, relational ones, and the rest of that. So
yeah, that's true.
Just to give some context.
I like that you clarified it that way, because there's church hurt that comes from like a systemic issue within the church.
Yeah.
And then there's church hurt that comes from the fact that, I don't know, all of us who go to church are broken. And as when broken people interact with broken people, brokenness shows up. And there's a lot of hurt that comes in that. So I think I can talk about a few. Like there's some systemic things with church that did hurt me. And so like I said, I've generally had a positive experience with church. I would say the positives have outweighed the negatives, but it doesn't mean that I haven't had negative. And I grew up in church, right? So there's lots of stories. I would say from my childhood, going into adulthood, the first experience that I had with, I would call disappointment in church, was growing up. I definitely grew up with the ideology or the theology that, if you're a good girl, if you don't date around, you don't sleep around, you honor God, you read, you study, you go to church, and you pray, you're going to have a fantastic life. You have no reason to be sick, no reason to be poor, no reason to really have challenges. And if you do have challenges in your life, it's because you're not praying enough or you're not fasting enough. As long as you're praying, you're fasting, you're leading a holy life, your life should be like pure bliss. And as you can imagine,
that's
I became an adult. And there were seasons of the opposite of pure bliss. And I think thankfully, despite that theology that I grew up with, I do feel like I had a personal relationship with God, so I could still take things to Him. But if, like growing up with the theology where if something's going wrong in your life, it just means you're doing something wrong or something is not right with you, that's very hard. I think it did not prepare me for what it means to be an adult Christian and to have challenges and to suffer and all of that, even though you're a Christian. So I would say that's one systemic thing. So I remember like my first church that I moved to when I was here was an amazing church. We went there when we had just come to Canada. The women in the church cared for us so well. They would come pick us up every Sunday, Prince, and take us to church. And, we were young and inconsiderate, so sometimes we'd keep them waiting for like 30 minutes and they would be late to church because of us. And the man never raised his voice. He was never upset. He was always patient and he never left us behind. That to me is the fruit of the Spirit exemplified. And as an adult now, I realized that was bad behavior, but like we were 15, so we had no idea that was like not okay, right? But they would come in, week out. If they weren't going to come, they would give us a heads up. Sometimes they would come, they would have cooked for us. They would have frozen the food. They would give it to us to eat for the week. They were amazing.
Wow.
It was a great church in terms of community. We never had to spend Christmas, Easter, holidays alone. Different people from the church would invite us over to their house, host us, feed us like queens. You know what I mean? It was really amazing in the community aspect, but then when it came to the theology of the church, it was like, if we would go for like 4-hour vigils, we're praying for all these like things that we want God to do, but then sometimes you don't see those things, right? And it can be very discouraging. So I think eventually I was like, okay, I tried to talk to the pastor to be like, okay,
what were you hoping to see more of?
Just like real life. A lot of us had come, we had like mental health issues. Some of my friends were dealing with like debilitating depression.
Yeah.
And like they would go to the church and be like, I'm going through this, and be like, oh, you're not praying enough. If you prayed enough, you wouldn't be depressed.
I see.
Or if you were fasting, you wouldn't be depressed. If you're struggling in school, it's because you didn't pray enough or you're not working hard enough. And that's very hard to hear as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and all of that. And so like I would have conversations with leadership and they'd be like, we agree with you. But you know, teaching anything else isn't as like accessible to people, because when people come to church, they want to hear how God can save them from all the poverty and immigration issues and all of that they're having, right? So that was very hard for me, because then I felt like I was a adult growing up without the guidance that was necessary. So I think that's one systemic one. I'm going to be talking for a while, so maybe you do one story and then I can do another one. But
I think
but
the one you just talked about in terms of how you can, you can face you can go through experiences where you're like expecting things to work out because you're on track, you're doing the right things, you're faithful in church, you're living a life that's pleasing to God, you're trying to at least, and then you expect then everything else should work out, but then it doesn't. I think for me, that one of the statements that really, really threw me off, and it took time for me to wrestle with it and get to a place where I understood the better perspective on it, was the one where it's like, God is not glorified in your failure. So as a campus fellowship, member of a campus fellowship where our studies was just as important, I could not fail. Like it just, we didn't entertain it. We cannot fail. We succeed. A's, B's, but we don't fail. But when I failed, I didn't tell anybody in the fellowship.
Of course, because then it means something is wrong with your faith,
God
right?
is not glorified. That failure sounds like we're not ambassadors here, so I just kept it under wrap. But I struggled with it. I ended up telling one person who was a good dear friend of mine in the fellowship, but the only other group, the only people I told other than that person was outside of the fellowship, because then it's like, you're going to have to rewrite the course. You have to see people. So you might as well find out, how do you go about rewriting this course? So I think that was one that it was hard to hear, because right now I would never tell, like, I understand the place of success and how God wants us to thrive and succeed. But even through failures of life, God is still God. So, but obviously in that moment, it was just like in the academic sessions, like the people who were academically acing it were like, God is glorified. We have prayers before exams. Every Monday when the week of exams is starting, we come in for prayer meeting, and we come with our results that we want in mind. You put A's attached to the subject. So if it's philosophy 101, you put A there, because that's what we expected. So, but it doesn't really give you a good picture of what it looks like to journey through life and through the disappointments. Still choose God and not just be coasting through. So that would be a systemic one, where it's just like, I had to learn to deconstruct some things and reconstruct the right things.
I agree with you. Like, I love that. And I think going out of the Nigerian church, after I realized, okay, I'm 20 years old, I'm not going to change an entire church and denominations theology. I think they're happy with their theology as is. And I remember one of the other, so I walked away from that and I was like, okay, surely the issue must be with the Nigerian church. The North American churches, surely they're perfect. They know this theology thing. They don't do the prosperity gospel as much. So surely when I go there, no issues. That is when I learned Nigerian, American, Canadian, all broken. We're all very broken people. And so in university, I was part of this like group. Once again, amazing group. Being part of that group changed my life forever and really helped my faith, because that's where I learned like good theology. I learned like the truth about God and all of that, right? So great experience. However, this group basically brought together like people from all sorts of like denominations. So like Baptist, interdenom, non-denom, Pentecostal, Presbyterian. But I think for some reason, Pentecostals were not as attracted to the group. So I think I would say like Baptist or people more Baptist leaning would be at the church, at the Bible study. And some of them had theology that was like a little scary for me, right? So I remember there were men in the group that would be like, women should never speak in public. But this is like a university.
In public or in church?
In church setting. Okay. Yeah, like women aren't supposed to speak in public, right? As an example. Yeah, so like whenever a woman would speak, they would like leave. Oh, sorry. Or can we do it again? Okay. Yeah, so like I remember in university, like one of the thought processes that some of the people who are more leaning towards, like, I guess one side, was that women weren't supposed to speak
in church settings.
In church settings, in public. But this wasn't a church; it was a campus fellowship. But to them, it's this
similar.
Yeah, it's similar enough. So some of them would be like visibly uncomfortable or like leave the room when a woman was speaking. And that was very interesting to me because it just made me feel like they genuinely believed that women were like weaker or whatever, or didn't have a voice. And this is university where you're learning to have a voice and to share your opinions and all of that. And the women who were speaking they were women who had been in ministry 10 years, 20 years. They definitely had the qualifications to speak, right? Or like if we were dancing, they would leave the room because I guess women's bodies were like provocative or whatever, right? So, but it was like, those icebreaker games that you do where it's, you move around and then you freeze. It was just like an innocent icebreaker game. But even that, I was just like, this is like objectifying a human being, right? Like, I don't know, like no one is dancing anything crazy for games like that. So I think that's where it started. So there was a part of being a woman, and then oh my gosh, I feel like we don't talk about it enough. Race. When you start to enter into like multi-ethnic situations where a lot of there were a lot of Black people. I think at the time it was maybe me, Ore, and two other people. There were a lot of us. And so here I am, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all these Black friends. This group is amazing. I need to bring them in. And for some reason, anytime I was in a Christian setting where it would just be me and one more person, usually me and Ori, I don't know how, it would be very weird, but it wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah.
But the minute I start to invite my other Black friends into it, for some reason it became intimidating, and we would start to get really odd comments, like super odd, or like people would be visibly uncomfortable if there were like 10 people in the room and 8 of us were Black. Like it would just be weird to them. But I'm like, I'm in a room where I'm the only Black person or one of 2 or 3 all the time, and it's not uncomfortable for me. Like, why is this so uncomfortable for you?
Yeah.
And so like race was a big factor then as well. And then I remember at the time I was still going to my Nigerian church, and people would make comments about, oh, why are you going to ethnic church? You're not supposed to go to ethnic church. Like things like that. It was really weird. And it was similar too when my first job was like at a Christian conference center up north.
Yeah.
That one was terrible. Oh my gosh.
The job was bad or just the experience?
The job was amazing. The experience was good. The first year me and Ori went, because there was only 2 of us.
Yeah.
It was still weird. Like people would come in and be like, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. You're so gorgeous. I don't think I'm not beautiful, but it was very obvious that like they just weren't used to seeing Black people in those settings, right?
Yeah.
But the first year was easy. The second year, I was like, this place is so great. I invited all my friends to come join me. Oh, that year was terrible. I've never experienced so much.
So year 1 was really good. And then because of how good
remember what I said? When there's only 2 of us, 1, 2, 3, it's easy for people to digest. The minute I bring my Black entourage with me, it just becomes a whole thing. That year was really bad. I remember like one time somebody just like, I don't know, trigger warning, like came down the hallway. I was like, I hate Black people. Or like we had like a dance party, and so we started to play some Nigerian music, and people just left the room just to us to dance. I'm like, I've been listening to Taylor Swift all night and having a good time. I'm playing 1 or 2 songs from my culture, and you can't even stand it. You're leaving the room.
Yeah.
And I remember one lady came to me. I was like, oh, I noticed there's more Black people here. I was like, yeah. She's like, are you guys related? I was like, no. But I don't think she cared, because for the rest of my time there, she called them my cousins. She's like, oh, I saw your cousins in the other room. And then my boss who was there was like, should I correct her? I'm like, what? Why should I be the one to tell you to correct her? You should just go correct her, right?
Yeah.
Like putting me in a position like that. That year was terrible. Every week there was an incident. There was an incident that had something to do with race. So I did find that my experience in the multicultural church was very tough because
that actually
it's very hard. Yeah,
that's hard, and that doesn't even. I don't know if there's another category we can use. Maybe church trauma, because I don't know if church hurt really does justice to that.
I know, right? Like,
that's horrible. That's absolutely horrible.
It was really bad. And I remember one time too when we went on a missions trip. Oh yeah, race. I would say race is probably the biggest thing that has been the source of hurt for me in the church. Like I remember when we went on a missions trip as well. Like we were at this market or something, and this guy was like catcalling me, and I wasn't interested. And then next thing I know, he calls me like bleeping N-word, like as I'm passing, and like very derogatory.
Your mission trip outside of the country?
Outside of the country. Okay. And so I go to my obviously non-Black mission trip leader to be like, this is something somebody called me. Yeah. And she's like, well, people are broken. And that was it. I was like, someone just called me the N-word, the bleeping N-word. As a Black person, I don't know what's more derogatory. And because she just made it sound like it was nothing, I thought it was nothing until I met other like leaders on the trip who were Black, and then they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you experienced that. That has been our whole experience living here long term. Like there's a lot of race and people really look down on you in this part of the world when you're Black. Yeah. And it's been tough for us doing ministry. Like ministry for our white friends is visibly different than ministry for us. And it's been hard. And so after their experience, they started to do like racism sensitivity training for people going into the mission trips the years after. So I think my friends who went the year after, there was more of a sensitivity to it. Yeah. But I would say systematically, that's like my experience with church. I have many more stories, but this episode cannot go on forever. Well, but those are some experiences that I've had with church hurt.
I think just the more you think about it, these are things that sometimes it's easy to sweep them, file them away. Yeah. But in reflecting about it, and I'm sure there's other stories, when you reflect on it, it's actually horrible. It's horrible to, one of my, I think the hardest things to hear was when I was, obviously went into Bible school to study. I did an MDiv, Master of Divinity in Theology, in preparation for pastoral ministry.
In a school where there were a lot of like Black students, right? Yeah.
You know what? My experience in the school was not terrible. Like I think one of the worst things that happened, which these things roll off my back, I don't really dwell on them, was when I was having a, you know, there's regular semesters, and then there's those intercession courses that's just 1 week. So they just pack the class into Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so I think it was day 3. It was a study on hard texts in the Bible. And then the professor said, and I asked a question, and then I said, what do we do if we're looking at something from the book of Revelations? Now it's Revelation, but a lot of people call it Revelations.
Yeah,
it's Revelation. So I just, one that day I changed and I called Revelations, and it's like, he drew the attention and said, everybody please pay attention to this.
My gosh.
Everyone pay attention to this. Nobody calls this book Revelations. It's Revelation. Make sure this doesn't happen again. Are we clear? Then he went back to it. I don't know if he even answered the question. And at the end of the week, that was Wednesday. On Friday is like half a day of classes. The other half of the day is like
vibes.
It just vibes you. Like, what are the assignments? Make sure you submit it. This is the deadline for it. And so then you're supposed to do assessments. Yeah. So he was kind of shaking hands with the students, because it's a small class. It was maybe 15 or 20 of us. Couldn't be more than 20. And I was shaking hands, and I went to him and said, thank you so much. I really loved the class. Did a lot of learning, lots of things that helped me to kind of expound on. And I think he was really true enough that I came and I smiled at him and I gave him a handshake. And I moved on. Like, it was a very horrible thing to experience. Like, I've never called Revelations since that day. But the more I reflect on it, it was horrible. And a lot of people actually came to me and talked to me about it, about how did I hope that wasn't, it was more embarrassing than anything. But I couldn't help but think, I don't know if this is something you had to do the way you did it. That was just an experience that really, this is in school where it's like, this is seminar, as much as they have some courses that are not necessarily in the seminary aspect, it's a really reputable. So I was blown away. That was hurtful, and it took a while to kind of shake it off and move on from it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really process it as something that was, oh, this is bad. But the more I reflected on, and I saw how it treated what like related with everyone, because there was maybe one or two of us that were not white in the class.
Yeah.
So it was hard to kind of take. But the one that really hurt and took me a while to get over was being in, once again, Bible school, like going through seminary, and I was preparing to do an internship, and I started considering where I would go and do an internship. And someone who was very key, someone I respected, walked up to me and said to me, "This church is probably not a good church for you. You should find another church to."
Why?
Yeah, there was no.
Wait, you have to give people context here. You had been in this at this church for like what, 8 years, serving.
It's 8 years, so I'm just 6 to 6, 7 years.
Yeah, you had been serving. You had lived in the church, so you had actually worked at the church as well.
Yeah.
You were basically like the building superintendent for what, 3-4 years at this point.
No, not up to 3-4 years, but probably 2 years.
Yeah,
so,
but you had been serving faithfully. You had been showing up. You had been serving at the church for years at this point, right? So, and then you go to Bible school, and it's like you do an internship.
You go 6 to 8 month internship at the end of your program.
And generally, you sometimes you're at your church, right?
Yeah, usually you do that in your church, except your church is connected to another church.
Yeah, exactly.
Then kind of otherwise, it's because it's how many churches do you know? If you didn't grow up in this country, how many churches do you actually know?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You need them to help you, even if it's not your home church.
Yeah.
Either the school places you in a different church because they have the connections, or you just go to your home church because it's easier to do it that way.
And it's a free internship. They're not paying.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's just like, exactly. It's your home church, right?
Church, and then the church can even decide to give you something to encourage you, but it's not stipulated that they have to. So I was obviously thinking about it, and it's like, mind you, the person that said this to me was not the lead pastor. This is someone else, and I was really just thrown off. Felt really bad, and I went back and I prayed, and the more I thought about it, I realized this person doesn't really get to determine whether this church is a good fit for me or not. And when I had a conversation with the lead pastor, I was like, no, we want you here. We've seen you grow here. We actually value what you bring to the table here. So it would be amazing. It was actually more of a, I hope you're thinking about doing your internship here, because I have plans for you to do your internship here. Not where are you thinking? He was more, I hope we're top of the list. And I know you might have other options, but please choose us.
Which is like, what other options?
But it was so positive and redeemed. And the funny thing, I think maybe a year or so later, I had a conversation with the person who said this to me, and the person profusely apologized. Recognizing, but it doesn't. It's an experience. It profusely apologized, but that was when I then realized.
You have to specify this person actually had authority. This person was in a leadership position, right? It wasn't just like a random person, right? So their opinion actually mattered to you.
Like I said, I looked up to the person. So it's not just anyone. And I had the opportunity to have good conversations with the person at the time. Before then, I'd filled in ministry and done a bunch of things. So like if it was said to me from if I maybe got some context in terms of maybe the church doesn't really give young people the opportunity to grow in ministry. So this is not, then I could have said, that's a good perspective in terms of you are going to be wise. If you really want to grow in ministry, maybe you find somewhere that opportunities are prevalent. But there was really it just seemed more like a thing where it's just like, do I fit? Is this am I able to, can I show up right? Do I have the ability to minister here? Am I one of the elites in terms of pastors? So it did something to me that I had to go back and pray. I had to go back and ask God, is this a sign? And I was like, I didn't call you. If I want you to go somewhere else, I'll lead you somewhere else. But more importantly, why don't you have a conversation with the person leading the ministry, who has been set and trusted with the vision to lead the ministry? And then you make your conclusions. And just in having a conversation, I was like, that went out the window quickly. But I just think that conversation could have really gone different ways, because it was around the same time I had a conversation with my professor in school who said, don't feel pressure to do your internship in your home church. If you need placements, we will work with contacts to place you. If I had defaulted into his mindset of, I have to go, I can't, I could have, but if I did that, it would probably still would have been justified. I just did not go that route, but it was hurtful enough that if I did not maybe take a moment to reflect on, I could have walked away. So that was hurtful. That
I can imagine.
Definitely.
No, I know I can't pretend like this is my first time hearing the story, but I remember the first time you told me that I was really upset.
Yeah.
I was flabbergasted because it was questioning your own heart, right? Like, and it was based off of an assumption that your philosophy for ministry was different from and you don't get to do that, right?
And then it makes you second guess because you're asking yourself, am I in this thing for the wrong way? But then I ask myself, like,
because the undertone of that comment was more like, Prince is looking for something flashy or like whatever.
Yeah.
And the church was too humble for that type of thing, so it wasn't going to be a good fit. But what? I don't know, right? And it just faithless.
In addition to that thought, one of the things, even from that I think is really important, there's ways in which we've been part of church traditions that you show up into conversations and into places and there's a air of superiority about you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's almost dismissive of another person's because if the person, for example, if the person is Baptist or the person is this, you almost seem like we are the ones who are the custodians of truth, morality, conduct, power, theology, and then we invite you into a hallowed circle to give you the opportunity to speak, but don't take it for granted because we are truly the ones that know God. There's something about that in itself, it's a necessary ingredient for church hurt. It breeds opportunities for church
like you saying that reminds me too, because I remember like the campus fellowship I was part of too, my friend and I, my friend is also more Pentecostal leaning. I don't really care what denomination people come from, as long as like we all love the Lord, we're all serving and all of that. It's easy. I think it's what you're saying. I don't think my denomination is superior to any other denomination. I just think it's different expressions.
Yeah.
But then there are some people who genuinely, I remember they would say that, like, that Bible verse that talks about the man taking care of the woman as a weaker vessel.
Yeah.
They would interpret it as like the people more Baptist leaning are like supposed to take care of the people more Pentecostal leaning or charismatic leaning as the weaker vessels because they don't understand the Bible. So if we could be having, can you imagine we could be having a Bible study and I share my opinion and it means nothing because I'm Pentecostal leaning. Like how I think about it isn't clear. Their way is superior and it's their job to teach me the Bible. I'm talking about people my age in the same thing, right? So like my opinion is subpar and anybody who comes from my denomination is subpar. My goodness, I forgot about all this and I know we have to move on to the next segment, but this whole conversation now makes me wonder because since that experience, I think we went to our other church and that was like my only thing.
Yeah.
And that church was like predominantly Caribbean, Nigerian, African kind of thing. And then our current church is, I would say, similar. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
And so like, I'm now thinking about it. If God were to ever call me into a different setting, I think there's a lot of pre-work and prep work I would need to do to mentally prepare to be Black again. You know what I mean? And when I go to church right now, I'm not Black. I'm just normal. Yeah. Right? I just... the context of having to show up in a church setting and be of an ethnicity and be automatically tagged.
Yeah.
And I really hope not all churches are like that, right? Yeah. And then I don't want to discourage our viewers, listeners. This is just my personal experience, right?
I think, a few things with what you said. Yeah. There's the ethnic aspect of the way in which you show up in terms of the color of your skin and how that leads, how you sound, how that leads to conversation. Exactly. There's also the hurt that comes from people who are having different theological beliefs, doctrines, and all that, and how that shows up in terms of people thinking, well, we are the pure people who our gospel is pure, is untainted by. Yeah. And then, so there's those two, but maybe we can just switch gears a bit and talk about the relational aspect of it, just in terms of relationships, because these ones, the system sometimes, like you said, it's systemic, sometimes doctrine, ethnicity.
We're going to broken people doing broken things.
Well, let's, because I think when people hear church, there's different ways they categorize it. Can you speak into...
Where do you want me to start from?
Just one or two. I mean, like I said,
church hurt is hard.
All right. I hope you guys had as much fun listening as we had recording this. This is the first part of our 2-part episode on church hurt. And we've looked at a few issues in terms of the systemic aspects of church hurt, in terms of what causes it, from doctrine to beliefs to the other issues that might come up as a result of maybe disparaging beliefs in terms of what happens in church. But we'll switch gears in the next episode and touch on some other things that have to do with the relational aspect. But for this week, we want you to enjoy this one, and next week we'll pick up on the next one. Follow us on Instagram. I don't think we're on Twitter or X, but on social media, all the social media platforms, and Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
search My Heart,
wherever you get your podcast. And so please follow us. Comment, tell us exactly what you found interesting from this episode. I know we all have these experiences, so I'd love to hear your take, or just share with us what you think about what we shared and your personal experiences, because that would be helpful to see just how you've overcome that, how you experienced it and how you overcame it.
Yeah.
If you're still walking through it, you can share that as well.
We'd love to hear.
Yes.